He's been in the IT space for 18 years, first as a developer, now as an Agile coach, pursuing ways to make software engineering and delivery far less painful than it feels. Please welcome to the stage, Charles Rodriguez.
All right, 5 minutes. Good luck to everybody out here. First of all, I want us to open up by saying thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Thank you to the organizers for putting this awesome event together. Lots of new faces out here. So awesome introduction into the Agile space. What I'll be talking about today, so we mentioned a lot about software. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So this whole process of putting this presentation together was sort of a retrospective for me, kind of looking back on a story of working with a team that wasn't software. This was our content team. In the fall of 2016, we were approached by one of the managers at Dude Solutions, one of the managers for content creation and management. And the first thing that he came up to me and said, "Hey, Charles, I want to do Scrum for our team." And for those of you who are new to this, don't worry, if you get into this space, you'll hear that a lot. And of course, I listened to it, I was like, all right, this is a very common request. People come to me and say, hey, we want to do Scrum, we want to use Scrum. Not uncommon with software teams. But for us, it was really strange. And for us, I mean me and my coaching team with Richard Core. He's another gentleman who's really active in the community. But we looked at this and said, hey, this is an opportunity to see if all these principles, all these values really apply outside of software. I've worked with teams, and every time they're like, not a good fit. But these guys were really, really committed to it. So before we got into the framework, we said, hey, look, let's sit down, let's have a conversation. And we asked the age-old question that's starting to get under a lot of people's skins, but it's a lot of value that you get here is, you said you want to learn or you want to do Scrum, but really, what is the problem you're trying to solve by doing Scrum? So we had a really good conversation. They came up with a lot of issues, but what it boiled down to, ooh, look, it's dimming on me. That wasn't the part of the functionality. There we go. Woo-hoo. So when we sat down and we had a really good conversation, they outlined a bunch of issues that they were having, but we narrowed it down to the top 3, which we were like, okay, we can work with this. They mentioned, hey, we've got a very low level of predictability. We don't know when things are coming in and when things are getting delivered to our customers. There is no transparency into our work. So work comes in and they don't know when it's going to get done, so they're getting frustrated. And then there's siloed work streams. There's one person doing video, one person doing the written content. They weren't really utilizing that they had all this capacity to kind of work through these things. So in full transparency, when we were having this conversation with them, we were like, hey, look, I don't know how all of these concepts that apply to software are going to apply for content management. So full transparency, this is going to be a learning experience for us as much as it is for you, because we're going to need to rely on you guys to tell us what are the things that kind of fit and what are the things that we need to kind of mold for content delivery. And we launched. So the way that we approached teaching this team or working with this team, I want to use a metaphor of a house. When I ask you to look at that house, the first thing you'll notice is, man, it's pretty, it's got really bright colors, it's got some flowers, some nice landscaping on it. It's out in the open, but kind of small. If this were the house of Agile, and this is what usually happens in the industry, is people focus a lot on the practices. This is the practice. This is what you see at face value. This is what people get obsessed over. What are the practices? He mentioned it. The Scrum, the Kanban, Lean, Safe, insert name of new framework here. It's what everybody hears. It's what everybody wants to do up front. Hence the question when we got asked, I want to do Scrum. But in reality, going back to the metaphor of the house, is nobody really, I can't remember the last time I walked into a buddy's house and I was like, man, it's a pretty nice foundation you got there, man. It's pretty cool. Nobody ever pays attention to what goes on behind the scenes, the foundation of the house, probably the most important thing that makes up that house. If we were going back to the metaphor of the house of Agile, this is the values and the principles. And it's really small, and I did that on purpose. I really want you guys to look these up online and get familiar with them. But what are these? This is the heart of Agile. This is lean principles. This is the 4 core values. This is all these things that have come up over the years that are trying to say, look, we're trying to find new ways of building, they say software, but we were like, we're trying to find new ways of building products. So what do? We trained them. We sat down with them and we spent a good solid session where we focused just on exercises around those values and principles. So we did 20/20 bias with the 12 principles. What's more important to you? We used the penny batch game to show them the value of breaking down large chunks of work into smaller batches. We did a retrospective on those four things, the heart of Agile, the deliver, reflect, improve, and collaborate. How good are you doing that now, and what do you want your future state to be? We spent a lot of time focusing on that. The journey. It took them about 6 months to get to kind of figure it out. It is a journey. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of practice. But because they had this nice core of the values and the principles behind them, they started to realize the value behind, hey, we can be cross-functional. All right, there's no need for me to just do the videos. We can share that love. Transparency, good God, they had a backlog now. So when somebody wanted a new piece of functionality or a new piece of documentation, they can say, we can do it here, but something's got to pay the price. We've got to have that good logical conversation of prioritization. And of course, they use retrospectives to do that continuous improvement. Continuous improvement, regardless if you're using Scrum or whatnot, is extremely important. They're still going today. It's been 2 years. They went from 2-week sprints to 1-week sprints. They've actually gotten good at doing PI planning, so they're doing forecasting up to a quarter. But they're continuously improving and continuously evolving. Why? This is what I arrived to at the end of all this thinking for this presentation. The reality is that a solid foundation in values and principles leads to lasting and effective practices. I know I got a little bit of time, but I want to use one last illustration real quick. Think of everybody's kind of broken a hollow branch. You apply enough pressure, it'll break. If you try to build your practices without spending time on those principles and values, you build a hollow branch, and guess what? It will break. And we've all seen, well, some of us have seen Agile implementations go south. So take the time, learn about the values, learn about the principles, build that foundation, and then start that journey from there. Thank you. All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, who's got questions for Charles Rodriguez? Raise your hand. The giant ball will be coming your way. You can speak into the ball, and your question will be answered. So, all right, I know someone out there's got a question for Charles about his house decorating skills, if nothing else. Awesome. First question of the night. Oh, stand up, please, if you would, so we can get you on the TVs.
So as you were training up this team to implement Agile, and they were learning the values and principles, what did they find most foreign or most challenging to adopt?
I'm going to go into one of the practices. For them, sprint review was really weird because they were creating content and videos, and it's like, do we wait until the end of the sprint to show this to everybody who's consuming it? So what they did, we first tried it in the traditional sense. Wait till the end of a sprint, show all our work. And it was just weird because they got lots of feedback, and there was a lot of back and forth. And I was like, all right, let's try something different. Or they said, let's try something different. As soon as they were done with a story or a piece of work, it just went straight to whoever had to give them the feedback. So what they did was tighten that feedback loop and just keep going. So that was one of the things, that was the practice that stood out the most that was foreign to us. In software, we're like, hey, look, we're going to do a demo. We're going to show you what we got, talk about what we did. For them, it was like, we don't have that. We got content. We got videos. We want to just get that out there as soon as we can. And they really bought into they weren't doing continuous delivery, but it was like continuous delivery for them.
Great question. Other questions for Charles? Raise your hand. The blue ball of doom will be coming your way. All right, coming your way. Heads up. Stand up, please, if you would.
So what's a good way to learn all this online? Is there like a resource you recommend for values and the foundation?
Glad you asked. So when I do training sessions for the UNC boot camp, and I give them recommended reading. Really simple. I highly recommend go to, is it agilemanifesto.org? Yeah, go to agilemanifesto.org. It'll give you the original 4 core values that were written in 2001. What I enjoy the most is there's this page that has the history. So I'm really into like, well, why did these guys get together and come up with that? It gives you the history of what led into that. I am a huge fan of Spotify and their engineering culture. So if you go on YouTube, look up Spotify engineering culture video 1 and 2, and they epitomize a lot of the principles and values that is, Agile, the mindset.
Great question. Now, we've had a question coming through social. A question for you. If you could do anything differently in onboarding this team into the Agile principles, the journey that you just went through, what was the one thing you would do differently and why?
Ooh. What would we do differently and why? Honestly, I think that what we should have done, we prescribed 2-week sprints to them just because we as coaches, and it was almost like a detriment to us, is that we know too much sometimes. We're like, oh yeah, go 2 weeks. And they, within a couple of months, were like, 2 weeks doesn't work for us. We were doing it because you were telling us that that was the way to go, but we want to shorten it up to about 1 week. So what I would do differently is not be as prescriptive with their cadence and say, find the cadence that works best for you guys and work with it. This is the recommended. You could go between 1 to 4 weeks. Pick the one that works for you, as opposed to giving them the 2 weeks up front.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Charles Rodriguez.